All right, let's get right into it. When you hear the word bribery, your mind probably jumps to shady deals, legal trouble, that kind of stuff. But what if we reframe that for a second? What if we saw it less as a crime and more as a design flaw in how global business works, an architectural problem that actually needs a real blueprint to fix? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
First, let's just try to get our heads around the scale of the problem. Over $1 trillion. That is the insane, almost unbelievable estimate for what bribery costs the global economy every single year. I mean, it's a number so big it almost doesn't feel real.
And look, this isn't just about some numbers on a spreadsheet. That trillion-dollar drain is a massive roadblock. It kills fair competition, it holds back developing economies, and maybe worst of all, it just completely shreds the trust between businesses, governments, and everyday people. It's like a systemic poison.
So yeah, the bottom line is, we're not just talking about isolated incidents. We are dealing with a truly global corruption problem. The impact is felt everywhere, which means any real solution has to think just as globally.
And, for any company trying to operate internationally, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Trying to navigate all these different cultures, different laws, different ways of doing business, it creates a total minefield for potential corruption. And the stakes for getting it wrong are incredibly high.
For the longest time, the world's response to this problem has been, well, let's be honest, it's been a bit of a mess. It's this patchwork of different rules that often creates way more confusion than it does clarity.
You can practically watch the complexity build over the decades. Back in the 70s, you had a few countries making their own laws. Okay, simple enough. But then in the 90s, regional agreements pop up, and they're all a little bit different. Then you layer on major international treaties in the 2000s, and what you're left with today is this tangled, confusing web. For a global business, it's a total nightmare to navigate.
This mess, this complexity, is precisely why the conversation started to shift. People realized, instead of just slapping another patch on this crazy quilt, what the world really needed was a single, unified blueprint. And that brings us to the idea of a true global standard.
So this is the big question, right? For any company working across borders, how on earth do you build one system, a single, reliable, anti-bribery architecture that actually works no matter where you are in the world? How do you stop just reacting to this patchwork of rules and start proactively building a culture of integrity?
And here is the answer: ISO 37001. Now, it's really important to get this. This is not another law. It's a standard. It's a universal framework. Think of it as that architectural blueprint we were talking about. It tells you exactly how to design, build, and continuously improve an effective anti-bribery system for any organization anywhere on the planet.
Okay, so what exactly is a management system? I know it sounds a bit corporate, a little vague, right? But the concept behind it is actually really powerful and super practical. So let's break down how this whole thing actually works.
I absolutely love this analogy because it just makes so much sense. An anti-bribery management system isn't some dusty rule book you stick on a shelf and forget about. No way. It's like all those checklists, alerts, and backup controls in an airplane cockpit. It is a living, breathing, proactive process designed from the ground up to prevent the disaster, in this case bribery, from ever even happening.
And this system is built on a few core common sense pillars. First, it has to start at the very top. Leadership has to commit out loud to a zero tolerance policy. Then, you've got to assess your risks. Where are you most vulnerable? Next, you train your people and you properly vet who you do business with. And finally, and this is key, you never stop. You're constantly monitoring the system and finding ways to make it better. It's a continuous loop.
When you put a system like this in place, the difference it makes is just night and day. Without it, a company is constantly reacting to problems, its rules are inconsistent from one department to the next, and it's exposed to massive legal risk. But with a system like ISO 37001, suddenly you're proactive, you're standardized across the whole organization, and you can clearly show you're compliant, which drastically lowers your risk.
So, we've laid out the problem, and we've walked through the design of the solution. Now let's just bring it all home and talk about why a standard like this really truly matters, not just for giant corporations, but for the entire global market.
The payoff is just huge. For starters, it protects your company's reputation and your brand, and that's priceless. It also gives you a clear, solid defense if regulators ever come knocking. Crucially, it builds trust with your customers, your partners, your investors. And maybe most important of all, it actually helps build a real culture of integrity from the inside out. It helps level the playing field so that ethical businesses can win.
And that leaves us with one final thought, something to really chew on. We started this whole conversation by talking about architecture and blueprints. So, is a global standard like ISO 37001 just about corporate box ticking and compliance? Or could it be something more? Could it actually be the foundation, the first step toward building a genuine global culture of integrity? Now that's something to think about.